What's going on, everybody? Josh McCarty from Bills Chat, and I wanted to talk today about Stefon Diggs and replacing him in 2024 and all the production he had in 2023. I've been thinking about this, and it really seems like a daunting task, right? Like they let Stefon Diggs go, they let Gabe Davis go, they didn't bring back Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy. There's a lot of vacated targets from that wide receiver room, and when you start thinking about it, it's like, okay, so you're going to have a rookie in Keon Coleman. You're going to have a free agent in Curtis Samuel, who's never really established himself in the league as more than a wide receiver 3 in any offense. And then you have growth from Khalil Shakir and guys like Dalton Kincaid and James Cook chipping in. But I wanted to look at the numbers a little bit deeper because we all know there was a clear line in the sand last year when Joe Brady took over as offensive coordinator in week 11 and when Ken Dorsey ran the offense through the first 10 weeks. And one thing that happened after that line in the sand is, one, the Bills ran the ball a little bit more. Two, Stefon Diggs' numbers dropped considerably. We all know he didn't have a 100-yard game under Joe Brady. He actually didn't have a 100-yard game the last 3 months of the season. But I wanted to dig into these numbers because I do think it's going to be tricky to figure out just how much production the Bills are trying to replace because there are so many variables. One, if you just look at the games that Joe Brady coached, you're still not taking into account that he wasn't really running his offense. He took over midseason. He had to run the offense for Ken Dorsey that Ken Dorsey installed. So I still don't know if we know for sure what a Joe Brady system looks like. What I do think, though, is it probably gives us a little bit more accurate information if we isolate the 8 games under Joe Brady to try to predict what the Bills truly are trying to replace in Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs, by most metrics, over the course of 2023, had a top 10 wide receiver season. He had 107 catches, almost 1,200 yards receiving, had a 29% target share on the Bills, and had 8 receiving touchdowns. That's a fantastic season. The problem is when you look at those 8 games under Joe Brady, who is going to be the Bills offensive coordinator next year, there was a much more spread the ball around approach, feed more mouths. And when you look at what Stefon Diggs did under Joe Brady, his numbers in those 8 games, 34 receptions, 315 yards, and 1 touchdown. So what I did was I took those numbers and tried to figure out what they would look like, those 8-game numbers, over the course of a 17-game season. And this is what it looks like. It ain't great. The target share is still pretty high, 125 targets. That's down from the pace he had last year, but Diggs still got targeted a lot under Brady. They were just inefficient with his targets. But this is where, if you look at it over a 17-game season, it's pretty eye-opening. 72 receptions, 669 yards, and only 2 touchdowns. And when you look at the other receivers who were on the field for the Bills last year, Khalil Shakir actually would outpace him over the 17-game stretch. If you multiply the numbers out under Joe Brady, he would have 771 yards. Dalton Kincaid is right on his heels with 601 yards. Gabe Davis also gone from the room, 544. But look at James Cook, 474 yards. You can see it's much more of a strength in numbers approach with this offense. And keep in mind, it's very easy to say that the Bills went super run heavy. I think a lot of that is the impact of them going very run heavy in the Dallas game. But Josh Allen still paced for 4,000 yards passing in that 8-game stretch under Joe Brady. So depending on how you want to look at it, you can look at this as a daunting task where the Bills have to figure out how they're going to replace the 1,200 yards, the 8 touchdowns. What were the receptions again for Diggs? The 107 receptions. But I don't necessarily think that's the world we were going to live in anyway. I'm not necessarily going to sit here and tell you that Diggs would have only had 669 yards for the Bills this season. But what I will tell you is there was a clear regression last year. And whether or not that was because Joe Brady became the offensive coordinator or because Diggs fell off, I'll let you all decide that. But I don't think we have to look at this as there is this 1,200-yard void to fill on the offense. We already saw Khalil Shakir step up over that 8-game stretch and pace for nearly 800 yards. And now he's going to have an even larger role. So I think it's very realistic that Khalil Shakir in a larger role could get over 1,000 yards. I think it's very realistic that Dalton Kincaid, who under Joe Brady paced for 600 yards on 60 receptions, could bump that up a little bit and pace for maybe a little bit closer to 70 receptions for 700 yards. And then James Cook is certainly going to factor in the passing game. When you look at what happened with the running backs, if you have Cook, Ty Johnson, Latavius Murray, those guys had about almost 700 yards of receiving between them. Make sure my math is right on that. Yeah, just a little shy of 700 yards to the running back. That's what they would pace for. That's not what happened under Brady. That's what they paced for. If you spread those stats out over 17 games, I think the running backs are going to be involved a lot. So I think we have to be careful and I'm guilty of it too. I look at this wide receiver room and I'm thinking, holy cow, you got to replace Diggs. You got to replace Davis. You're relying on a rookie. You're relying on Curtis Samuel, who's never been more than like wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 4 in his career. And then you need Khalil Shakir to take a jump. But I think we have to live in the world of what we were actually dealing with Diggs, and what we dealt with last year for a variety of reasons was a guy that in the last 8 games of the season paced for less than 700 yards and was not the the highest yardage on the team as far as receptions go, or as far as receiving yards go. So Diggs is going to be a loss for sure. But I started looking at these numbers and it really got me to buy into the fact that I do think that the Bills are going to spread the ball around quite a bit this year. I don't know that for fantasy purposes, it's going to be as easy to say, well, Diggs is going to get his, and then maybe it's a Davis game, or maybe it's a Kincaid game, or maybe it's a Knox game. I think it's going to be a lot harder to predict. It'll be matchup based. There will probably be Shakir games. There'll probably be Curtis Samuel games. There'll probably be games where James Cook gets 10 targets out of the backfield because that's what the game plan is. So I think that when you look at it like that, when you zoom out, when you look under the hood, whatever analogy you want to use, I think we should all feel a little better about the task in front of Joe Brady, Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, Josh Allen, Keon Coleman, when it comes to replacing Stefon Diggs. The zoomed out view is that's a 1,200-yard receiver that was a Pro Bowler that just left your building, and you have nobody that sniffs his resume there to replace him. That's the zoomed out view. We just zoomed in on this video, and I think the reality is a little harsher on Diggs as far as what the Bills were actually trying to replace. So that's what was on my mind today. I just wanted to get that out there in a video. I thought it was interesting. Let me know in the comments what you think, because this is all projection. This is not any kind of perfect science in telling you that if Diggs had stayed next year, he would have hit 669 yards. It's a dangerous thing to take an 8-game sample size and assume that it would hold true over 17 games. And I did mention the fact that Joe Brady was still running Ken Dorsey's playbook, but I do want to stop us short of lumping the 2023 season as one isolated view of what Stefon Diggs did for this team, because there was a huge drop off really after the second week of October, and he was not the same guy for whatever reason you want to use to justify that. So I am Josh McCarty. Thank you very much for tuning into this video. While you're here, if you would like to like and subscribe, Luca and Stokes and I would appreciate that very, very much. We appreciate you taking the time to watch that. Until next time, I will see you on Bills Chat.